When I touched a man's reproductive organ and saw it grow, I froze. The laboratory was too quiet for Kaelira's taste. Silence made her ears twitch, and when her ears twitched, the guard stationed outside assumed she was plotting something dangerous. Which, to be fair, she was, but not the kind of danger that required plasma rifles. She paced between the glowing consoles, muttering calculations that weren't strictly necessary, mostly to give herself the appearance of working. Her assistants had already abandoned her, inventing excuses about family obligations, but Kaelira knew the truth. They couldn't handle the bizarre project she had brought into the lab. The project, of course, was sitting on the metal table in front of her, watching her with the suspicion of a man who knew he was one wrong move away from becoming a dissection subject. Irinder, a human soldier plucked from the latest skirmish, was strapped down by shimmering energy bands that didn't really restrain him, but hummed loud enough to suggest dire consequences if he struggled. He hadn't spoken since they brought him in, except to ask for water, which she had promptly spilled down his shirt in her eagerness to study his reaction to hydration. She approached now with the confidence of a princess who had never been told no in her life, even if half her confidence was pure bluff. Her ears flicked backward, catching the steady rhythm of his breathing. She set a tray of instruments beside him, scanners, syringes, and one tool that looked suspiciously like a salad fork but, in her defense, had several respectable scientific functions. "You look nervous," she said, leaning over him. "Do humans always stare like that? Or is this your attempt at intimidation?" Irinder finally answered, voice low but edged with sarcasm. "Depends. Is intimidation the same thing as wondering if you even passed basic medical training?" Her cheeks warmed. She wasn't used to insolence. In her court, one sarcastic comment could earn a century in exile. Here, in this laboratory, the rules bent differently. She tapped the salad fork against the tray and gave him her brightest smile. "I'll have you know I am highly trained. My people consider me a prodigy." "A prodigy at what?" he muttered. "Dropping water." She ignored him. That was the only way to maintain her dignity. Instead, she adjusted the scanner, which immediately sparked and let out a puff of smoke. She coughed delicately, as if smoke was part of the process, then waved her hand as though dismissing an irrelevant cosmic detail. "Your physiology fascinates me," she said, circling the table. "Muscle density higher than average. Nervous system surprisingly adaptive. Your heart rate increases every time I come near, though I assure you I have not deployed any death rays yet." His eyes darted to the glowing cuffs at his wrists. "Yet," she chuckled. "A joke. We do that too, you know." The scanner rebooted itself with a shrill beep, and Kaelira sighed. She reached for the next instrument, one that glowed faintly blue, and pressed it against his chest. His body tensed. Her ears perked. The hum of the machine synchronized with the rhythm of his pulse. She adjusted her grip, fascinated by the way the device responded to him, when suddenly her hand slipped. The tool slid downward, brushing over territory she had not, in all her studies, prepared to encounter. The reaction was immediate, startling, and not in any of her medical texts. She froze. He froze. The machine gave a triumphant ping, as if it had just unlocked the secrets of the universe. Her ears flared forward. "Oh, it grows." Irinder shut his eyes, muttering something in his language that the translator refused to process, likely because it was impolite. His face turned the color of a dying sun, and Kaelira, realizing what she had just witnessed, blinked furiously. For a moment she considered calling in the guards, just to confirm she hadn't hallucinated. But that seemed unwise for both political and biological reasons. "I didn't expect that," she admitted, voice thin. "Is it dangerous?" He cracked one eye open. "Only if you keep staring at it like it's about to explode." Her laughter escaped before she could stop it, ringing off the metallic walls. The tension shattered like brittle glass, and for the first time since she'd started this absurd experiment, she felt less like a princess pretending to be a scientist and more like a curious woman caught in the hilarity of discovery. "Remarkable," she said, composing herself with royal effort. "My people have never displayed such a feature. It could revolutionize our understanding of, well, something." "Yeah," Irinder said dryly. We call it awkwardness." She grinned, delighted. His sarcasm was not a threat but a bridge, and she found herself wanting to cross it again and again. She made a note in her datapad, half joke, half science, and tucked the glowing tool back onto the tray. "Don't worry," she said with mock solemnity. "For the sake of interspecies diplomacy, I will refrain from further accidental stimulation." "Diplomacy," he repeated, voice thick with disbelief. "That's what we're calling this." She tilted her head, ears flicking in amusement. "Would you prefer I call it intergalactic comedy?" His reluctant smile was answer enough. Outside the laboratory, the Citadel's engines thrummed like a giant heart. Kaelira knew the council would eventually demand answers about her project, and she knew her father, the king, would not forgive curiosity that flirted so closely with scandal. But for now, in this quiet, absurd, electrified room, she allowed herself to marvel at the human soldier, not as a specimen, but as a puzzle wrapped in humor, fear, and an unexpected capacity to make her laugh. And laughter, she realized, was far more dangerous than any forbidden experiment. Kaelira's report to the council should have been filled with numbers, graphs, and impressive diagrams that nobody ever bothered to check too closely. Instead, the datapad glowed with what could only be described as chaos, half-finished notes, doodles of star systems shaped like ears, and at least 3 sarcastic comments from a render she had accidentally dictated into the report. If anyone in the council actually read it, she would be exiled to the cold side of the moon before sunset. She sat cross-legged on the lab bench, ears twitching as she tapped the pad in frustration. Irinder was watching her again. He seemed to spend a great deal of time doing that, as if waiting for her to accidentally blow herself up. His arms were still cuffed in faint energy restraints, though loose enough now that he could shift and gesture dramatically whenever he mocked her, which was often. "You're supposed to be a princess," he said, smirking. "Doesn't royalty get someone else to do the paperwork?" "Normally, yes," she replied. "But when your experiment involves classified specimens and highly suspicious equipment, one must improvise." She jabbed the pad with a finger. "Besides, if I handed this report to my royal scribes, they'd faint halfway through the first paragraph." He leaned back against the table. "From boredom. From scandal," she corrected. "You have no idea how fragile their ears are. One mention of, well, what we discovered yesterday, and half the palace would need resuscitation." Irinder's face turned red again, which delighted her. "Are we really still talking about that?" "Of course," she said innocently. "It was a groundbreaking scientific revelation. Do you realize what this means for comparative xenobiology? Entire libraries will be rewritten." "Or burned," he muttered. She laughed, the sound bright enough to make the console lights flicker. Humor was fast becoming her shield, and to her surprise, Irinder wielded it just as skillfully. Later, when she attempted another scan, the machine emitted a series of loud beeps that sounded suspiciously like laughter. She frowned at it. "This equipment is defective." "No," Irinder said deadpan. "It's just judging you." She threw him a glare, but couldn't keep her mouth from twitching upward. Do humans always mock their researchers? Only the ones who nearly dropped glowing forks on them. She considered this, then tapped her datapad again. Observation. Subject displays excessive sarcasm. Hypothesis. This may be a primitive human defense mechanism, like spines on a star beast. Correction, he shot back. It's the only way to survive royalty who confuse salad utensils with science. Her ears twitched furiously at that. She was beginning to think they had minds of their own, flicking forward whenever he teased her, flattening when he caught her off guard. He noticed, of course, and seemed to enjoy it far too much. The hours slipped past in this rhythm of banter and half-serious study. Kaelira measured his reflexes, his muscle responses, his neural activity, and each time the equipment sparked or hummed, he had some joke ready. He told her stories about humans, about drinking contests, reckless pilots, and the bizarre custom of dancing in crowded rooms. She listened, fascinated not just by the content, but by the way he delivered them, casual, irreverent, as though the universe itself were a game to be laughed at. At one point, when she tried to explain the mechanics of her people's starlight-powered metabolism, He raised an eyebrow. So you basically eat sunlight? She sniffed. We consume energy at a highly advanced biochemical level. Right, he said. Like plants. Her ears shot up in indignation. Royalty does not photosynthesize. Sure, he said, grinning. Keep telling yourself that, Princess Sunflower. She threw a data crystal at him, which he caught easily despite his restraints. She made a note on her pad. Reflexes exceptional. Annoyingly so. But beneath the jokes, Kaelira felt the weight of something heavier pressing on the citadel. Messages whispered through the lab's comm lines. Encrypted but insistent. Reports of unrest. Human rebels refusing the Council's treaties. Her father's advisors debating war in long, sterile halls. She shoved the thoughts aside whenever they surfaced, clinging instead to the ridiculous comfort of laughter. Irinder must have sensed it, because when her ears drooped during one particularly bleak transmission, he said softly, "You know, for a genius princess, you look pretty bad at pretending nothing's wrong." She looked up, startled. "How would you know?" "Because I've seen soldiers do it all the time," he said. "We joke, we laugh, we pretend everything's fine. But when the mask slips," he shrugged, "you've got the same look." Her throat tightened, though she forced a smile. "Then I suppose I'm learning from the best." For a moment silence lingered between them, not the uncomfortable silence of their first meeting, but something tentative, fragile, edged with understanding. Then, perhaps to save them both from drowning in it, Irinder added, "By the way, you really are terrible with that scanner." She burst out laughing again, and just like that, the heaviness lifted enough to breathe. When the lab lights dimmed to signal the artificial night cycle, Kaelira dismissed her assistants, though none had returned since yesterday's incident. She lingered by Irinder's side, pretending to check the cuffs, but really studying him. His eyes were sharp, his smirk infuriating, and his silence, when he allowed it, carried weight she wasn't sure she was ready to name. "Tomorrow," she said at last, "I'll run a new test. Something less awkward." "Less awkward," he repeated. "That sounds boring." She arched a brow. "So you prefer awkward?" He gave her that maddening half-smile. "At least it's memorable." Her ears betrayed her again, flicking forward, and she turned quickly so he wouldn't see her grin. She dimmed the lab lights and left him to the hum of the machines, her datapad tucked under her arm, full of notes that were less about science and more about the man who had somehow turned her secret experiment into a comedy show. But as the door slid shut behind her, she whispered to herself, "Memorable can be dangerous." Kaelira arrived the next morning armed with determination, a cup of luminous star brew, and exactly 3 backup scanners, because the last 2 had either shorted out or, as Irinder claimed, simply died of embarrassment. The soldier was already awake when she entered, sitting upright on the table as though the restraints had long since become decorative. He greeted her with a smirk that suggested he'd been practicing new insults all night. "Good morning, Princess Sunflower," he said. She set the scanners down with exaggerated care. "If you persist in that nickname, I'll have you reassigned to the agricultural wing." "Perfect," he replied. "I've always wanted to work with plants. I hear we have a lot in common." Her ears twitched furiously, which only deepened his grin. She inhaled, reminding herself that humor kept tension at bay. It was either laugh or strangle him, and strangling a specimen would cause paperwork even she couldn't fake. The first test of the day involved neural mapping. She slipped a crown of thin metal filaments over his head, ignoring his muttered comments about fashion statements. The device activated with a hum, sending sparks of light across the console. Kaelira typed commands, watching as the monitor filled with jagged patterns. "You have unusual brain activity," she murmured. "Unusual compared to what?" he asked. "Your people or houseplants?" She glared at him, but kept working. The pattern shifted, spiking whenever she leaned closer. She noted it carefully, though her cheeks warmed. "Your neural responses are heightened around me. Maybe because you keep poking me with glowing forks." She nearly dropped her stylus. "This is scientific equipment, not cutlery." "Sure," he said deadpan. "That's what all alien princesses say." The device beeped loudly, and she scrambled to stabilize it. Sparks flew, and Arinder jerked in surprise. She yanked the crown off his head before it could fry both of them. Smoke rose faintly from his hair. "Well," he said, coughing, "at least now I know what a toaster feels like." She stifled a laugh, but couldn't help the smile tugging at her lips. "Apologies. Early prototypes can be temperamental." "Prototype?" His eyes widened. "You mean that wasn't even tested?" She cleared her throat and scribbled furiously on her data pad. "Observation. Subject survives high-voltage exposure. Impressive resilience." He groaned. "Observation. Princess is trying to kill me with science." The rest of the morning went little better. The metabolic analyzer jammed and sprayed him with shimmering gel that hardened into crystalline flakes. She rushed to clean it off, but he laughed so hard she ended up chasing him around the lab with a towel while his restraints flickered uselessly. By the time she cornered him, they were both breathless with laughter. "You're impossible," she said, tugging the last of the crystal from his hair. "And you're terrible at pretending you don't enjoy this." He shot back. Her ears betrayed her, flicking forward, and she quickly retreated to the console. She typed nonsense, just to keep her hands busy. "You're contaminating my data." "Pretty sure you're contaminating yourself," he muttered. She ignored him, though her pulse betrayed her just as clearly as her ears. By mid-cycle, the Citadel's comm lines flared with news of unrest. Voices echoed through encrypted channels, reports of humans resisting relocation, whispers of rebellion growing stronger. Kaelira pretended not to hear, drowning the messages beneath Arinder's jokes and the hum of malfunctioning equipment. But the unease coiled inside her, heavy and sharp. Arinder noticed, of course. He always did. When she faltered during a test, he leaned closer. "You're not laughing," he said softly. She blinked, caught. "I am concentrating." "You're worried." Her throat tightened. "It's not relevant to the experiment." "It is if I'm the experiment," he countered. "If your people are planning something, I should know." She hesitated, torn between duty and trust. Finally she whispered, "There are rumors that the Council wants to end negotiations, that they want to remove humans from the Citadel altogether." He stared at her, unreadable. Then, with that maddening smirk, he said, "Well, at least they won't have to argue about the food anymore." Her ears twitched. "Food? Your nutrient paste tastes like despair." She laughed despite herself, though her chest ached. Humor again became their shield, thin but unbreakable for the moment. That evening, when the artificial night descended, she lingered near him again. He was quiet now, eyes distant, the weight of rebellion pressing at the edges of his smirk. She studied him, heart uneasy. "You should rest," she said gently. "Hard to rest when your captor keeps staring at you," he replied, though without venom. She flushed and turned away. "I am not staring. I am observing." "Right," he murmured. "For science." Her ears twitched again, and she heard him chuckle softly in the dark. As she powered down the consoles, Kaelira realized with a jolt that their laughter had become something dangerous. It was no longer just a way to survive the absurdity of experiments gone wrong. It was a bond, fragile yet undeniable, forming in defiance of duty, politics, and the Council's iron grip. And bonds, she knew, could change the fate of worlds. The alarms in the Citadel wailed like a chorus of furious stars, but Kaelira refused to let panic reach her ears. She adjusted her tunic, straightened the cuffs of her sleeves, and glanced at Arinder, who was sitting on the lab table as though he were enjoying a particularly dramatic performance. "So," he said, leaning back on his hands, "is this your idea of a welcoming committee?" "Apparently," she replied, tapping the console, "or someone really hates our sense of humor." The door slid open with a hiss, and two guards stepped in, plasma rifles humming. Their faces were tight with the seriousness reserved for royalty and imminent chaos. Kaelira's ears twitched forward. She decided to greet them as politely as possible, while also maintaining the delicate illusion of control. "Greetings, honorable guards," she said, bowing slightly. "You've arrived just in time for an experiment." Arinder's eyebrows shot up. "Experiment," he whispered. "Yes," she whispered back. "The most scandalous one yet." The guards exchanged glances. Princess Kaelira, one said, voice clipped. The High Council demands access to your laboratory and— Ah, Kaelira interrupted, waving her hand. They are too hasty. The experiment is delicate. It requires extreme caution and discretion. One false move. She gestured vaguely at Arinder, who raised an eyebrow, and catastrophic embarrassment could ensue. Arinder snorted quietly, earning a glare from Kaelira. I think she means the scientific catastrophe, he whispered. She ignored him, smiling brightly at the guards. Do not worry. For your safety, I shall demonstrate the experiment first. She reached for the glowing scanner, and it immediately sparked in protest. The guards flinched, but she acted as though this was entirely expected. Arinder grinned. Yep, totally normal lab day, he muttered. As she ran through the demonstration, the guards' eyes widened at each unexpected spark, the strange shimmer of energy bands, and Arinder's occasional sarcastic commentary. Ah yes, very scientific, he muttered loudly when one console pinged like a trapped insect. Nothing suspicious at all. Kaelira's ears twitched at that, betraying her amusement. Observation, she said. Subject continues humor under duress. Impressive. The guards, uncertain what to make of it, took cautious steps backward. Kaelira seized the opportunity. Now, if you'll allow the experiment to proceed in peace, I shall record all relevant data, she said, tapping her datapad with exaggerated authority. They hesitated, but the absurdity of the scene, sparkling machines, a half-clothed human soldier smirking, and the princess adjusting a glowing fork with delicate precision, overpowered their caution. Slowly, they retreated. Once the door sealed, Kaelira let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Arinder tilted his head. You really can talk your way out of anything, huh? I've had practice, she said. Though you humans could take a few notes. He raised one brow. I think the notes would be mostly, don't get electrocuted, don't call your soldier plants, and avoid Princess Sunflower's forks. She laughed, ears flicking in delight. Wise advice, indeed. The rest of the day passed in a blur of tests and laughter. Kaelira measured his reflexes using holographic projections of star matter and his neural activity, while he teased her about inventing alien dance routines for no reason. When she accidentally tripped over a power conduit, he caught her by the waist. And that's why humans are necessary, he said with a smirk. Her ears twitched furiously, and she swatted him playfully. Hypothesis. Subject enjoys teasing scientists. Observation. Humans are troublesome but charming. He rolled his eyes. Hypothesis. Alien princess is easily flustered by sarcasm. Observation. She might secretly enjoy it. They laughed, even as the citadel's warnings continued to hum faintly in the background. Kaelira knew that at any moment, the High Council might send more guards, demand the experiment cease, or try to remove Arinder entirely. Yet in that chaotic harmony, she felt an unexpected calm. Humor had become their armor. Late in the cycle, a new alert flashed. Rebel activity near the citadel's eastern gate. Kaelira's eyes narrowed. They're mobilizing, she said quietly. Arinder leaned close, whispering, which means we're in the perfect spot for a front-row view of chaos. She smacked his shoulder. Don't be ridiculous. We must plan carefully. Careful is boring, he replied. Fun is dangerous, she finished for him. They shared a brief smile, a silent acknowledgement that whatever happened, they would face it together. Then Kaelira turned back to the console, hands flying over the controls, adjusting force fields and recalibrating scanners. Arinder watched, leaning against the table, grinning, occasionally tossing in a quip about her mad science skills. By the artificial night, she had secured the lab against intrusion, though the distant echoes of rebellion pulsed like a living thing beneath the citadel. She knelt by Arinder, checking the energy bands that had become almost decorative at this point. You're lucky, she said softly, that I enjoy your company. Lucky, he asked, eyebrows rising. Or doomed? Her ears twitched forward, and she smiled, brushing his hair from his forehead. Depends on whether you count laughter as salvation or curse. He chuckled. I'll take salvation, with a side of sarcasm. Kaelira leaned back, tapping her datapad thoughtfully. The Council's interference, the rebellion, the unstable alliances, all of it threatened to overwhelm them. Yet in this moment, with sparks flying and humor binding them, she realized something vital. Sometimes, the only way to survive a galaxy of dangers was to laugh in its face. And perhaps, just perhaps, a little forbidden affection could be the most powerful weapon of all. The citadel trembled with alarms and the distant hum of engines, but Kaelira walked through the corridors with a calm she didn't entirely feel. Irinder followed, arms crossed, smirking as though chaos were merely a Tuesday diversion. "Princess," he said, voice low. "This looks like the part of the story where someone dies dramatically." Kaelira tapped her ear, which twitched with restrained irritation. "Then let's make it a story where everyone survives and has a good laugh afterward." They reached the central chamber, where the council had gathered, weapons drawn and faces taut with suspicion. Kaelira stepped forward, ears upright in defiance. "Honorable members of the High Council," she began, voice steady, "I present to you a solution, not a scandal. The human soldier Irinder is not a threat. He is an ally." Murmur spread through the chamber. Irinder raised an eyebrow. "Do I get a medal or just public humiliation?" "Both," Kaelira said without missing a beat. A counselor stepped forward. "Princess, you defied our orders. You conducted forbidden experiments. How can you?" "With the greatest scientific rigor," she interrupted, flipping her datapad to a display of real-time bio readings, energy scans, and neural activity. "Observe the results. Not only has the subject survived every test, but his biology reveals compatibility with our people in ways previously deemed impossible. Humor, adaptability, resilience, all of which we lack in abundance among ourselves." "Resilience," one counselor scoffed. "And that justifies your—" he gestured vaguely at Irinder. "Yes," Kaelira said, "because in chaos, survival depends on unexpected allies. Laughter, empathy, trust, these are as important to survival as any weapon." She turned to Irinder. "He has taught me that the smallest gestures, humor, patience, courage, can bridge centuries of suspicion." Irinder grinned. "So basically, I'm a living, breathing treaty." The chamber erupted in argument, but Kaelira raised a hand, ears flicking with authority. "Enough. We can fight each other to death, or we can acknowledge that alliances sometimes take unusual forms. I choose the latter." One counselor, after a long pause, muttered, "Perhaps unprecedented, but effective." Kaelira's ears twitched with satisfaction. She had won them not by defiance, but by showing that science, courage, and humor together could forge a path forward. Irinder leaned close, whispering, "You really can talk your way out of anything." "Not just talk," she replied. "Observation, experimentation, and occasionally, strategic humor." Outside the chamber, rebellion forces had paused, unsure how to respond to the unusual ceasefire called in their sector. Kaelira and Irinder moved to the central control console. She tapped commands to stabilize the citadel, redirecting energy shields and creating corridors for the humans and alien loyalists alike. Irinder chuckled as a panel sparked and hissed, "You really do have a flair for chaos control." "I call it improvisation," she said, eyes focused on the screens. "It's an essential skill when the fate of two worlds is in your hands." Hours passed, and slowly the alarms faded. Peace, fragile but real, settled over the citadel. Kaelira leaned against the console, ears relaxed but attentive. "We did it," she said softly. Irinder smirked. "We didn't just survive. We made history, and entertained ourselves along the way." Kaelira smiled, a mixture of relief and quiet pride. She thought of the experiments, the sparks, the laughter, the missteps, and how every moment had changed her. She had been a curious princess, eager for knowledge, but now she was more than that. A strategist, a bridge between species, someone who understood the weight of empathy as clearly as the pull of a scientific discovery. Irinder reached out, brushing a loose strand of her hair back. "You've changed," he said softly. "I have," she admitted. "And so have you. You taught me patience, humor, and how to survive absurdity with dignity." He laughed quietly. "And you taught me how to survive royalty with a smile." Their laughter mingled, a promise that what had begun as a bizarre experiment had become a bond neither could deny. The council, the rebellion, the citadel itself, all could wait. For the first time, Kaelira felt something she had never experienced in the sterile halls of power, the joy of genuine connection. As the stars glimmered beyond the citadel walls, Kaelira turned to Arinder. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." "Together," he echoed, and the word carried weight, humor, and hope. In that moment, the galaxy didn't feel so hostile. It felt alive, unpredictable, and full of possibility. Kaelira realized that her journey had taught her the ultimate truth. Science could uncover wonders, but laughter, courage, and connection could change the universe itself. And with Arinder by her side, she knew they could meet whatever stars or storms awaited, hand in hand, ready for the next experiment. The end.